On Wednesday, the New South Wales government called the New South Wales festival industry into a room and it handed them a death sentence.
In our first Lockouts film, we discovered how ineffective the lockout laws were on keeping Sydney safe from random violence, but how devastating they were on decimating the nightlife district, killing night culture and the nighttime economy. We also investigated how other leading international cities had instituted programs to keep their nighttime economy still thriving and safe at the same time, and we offered up suggestions on how Sydney could do the same. But sadly, the lockout laws are still in place, and our newly re-elected Liberal Party government has now decided to target music festivals as the next critical part of our popular culture, with regulations, restrictions and onerous conditions. Sydney's ill-conceived lockout laws were implemented in 2014, and since then there's been widespread devastation of our nighttime economy, our entertainment precincts and the value of culture in Sydney. Today there are 176 fewer venues than before the lockouts.
Issue. No doubt you've heard a big backlash against the Mountain Sounds Festival being cancelled over the weekend due to what organisers say were last-minute, quite strict conditions imposed that wouldn't allow them to go ahead. Was this the intended consequence?
Well, look, I don't think it's fair for organisers to blame anybody but themselves. There are rules in place. We want young people to have fun. We want more tourism to the Central Coast and other places. We want to encourage people to have fun at these festivals. But the festival organisers just have to obey the law. It's not just about making a quick dollar. It's also about keeping the people who turn up to be safe. And that's a responsibility we have. We want these festivals to grow in number. I want more people to enjoy them, but to enjoy them safely. And that's why we've said to the organisers, as other states do, there are rules in place now for you to obey to make sure that everybody who turns up is safe. And if you can't spend money making your event safer, well, that's a decision for you, but it's not fair to blame the government.
I never want to see this event held in Sydney or New South Wales ever again. We will do everything we can to shut this down.
Everybody got a dollar and a dream. You got a couple more, now you coming for our scene. Kids are always gonna wanna pop a bean, but they deserve to know if what they're taking isn't clean. Think it's time you step down, nothing but a letdown. Stopping all the fun, to be just trying to get down. Acting high and mighty while you're sipping on your champagne. Yeah, I had a couple thoughts about your campaign. Shut it down, yeah. Shut it down, yeah. Fuck the casino, wanna go to Mountain Sound, yeah. Shut it down, yeah. Shut it down, yeah. All this liquidation, think I'm finna drown, yeah. I'm proud of you for staying off the pills. I'm sure there's other ways you get your thrills. Hearts so cold that you give me the chills. Being real with you, I'm trying to keep it real. See you plotting on the low, trying to rake in all the dirt. Kill our nightlife in the shirt, send them to the casino. Just cause you don't know, never act a line of blow. Smoked a spliff and felt the glow, let it snow, let it snow. Maybe start taking a hold or being controlled. They got a blindfold on me, lies that we all being sold. You do what you're told, and that's why I roll the green. Wait for it all to unfold, they're bathing in gold, no love for the culture. Easy to see that you're hiding your feelings. You got all the boys in blue sliding in DMs, and now you've exposed yourself. Should've stayed strong and composed yourself. All this shit got you dizzy, just listen to Drizzy. You're glad to know yourself, please make a note yourself. All of these kids got the pills on them, then the dogs run up and sing like it's Hillsong, and so they take all of them, scared of the consequence. Only to overdose, just use some common sense. Claim you play the glockenspiel, I think you're full of shit. All our youth are dying, you could save and get a grip. And in all these businesses, but you just won't admit that it's all about the money. No surprise, I guess we all know everybody got a dollar and a dream. You got a couple more, now you coming for our scene. Kids are always gonna wanna pop a bean, but they deserve to know if what they're taking isn't clean. Yeah, I think it's time you step down, nothing but a let.
Music brings a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to the imagination, and life to everything.
9 years ago, almost to the day, we marched on Parliament on the 23rd of February. But we're not just up here to stand in solidarity with Sydney. We're here because the Berejiklian government have waged war on music.
The whole experience of music festivals like the Big Day Out and others like it inspired me to compose and produce my own music. A few years later, I'd start a band with my friend Kim from university. We set up our keyboards and computers in his kitchen and try and emulate the music that we were seeing at these festivals. This was the beginning of the presets. This culture feeds itself. It regenerates. Year after year, its legacy gets bigger and brighter and better. It gets more rich, it gets more diverse, and it's not built overnight. It takes decades to build this. It doesn't work when you're sitting in your bedroom reading about it on Facebook. It's not the same when you're scrolling through your phone looking on Instagram. You've got to be there with your friends, under the stars, with the music loud. You're jumping around with a band you love, or better yet, discovering your new favourite band that you never knew existed.
It's super important. It's not only economically important, but I think music has always been something that brings people together. It's always been something that characterises ritual and celebration, and it gives people an excuse to talk to each other, an excuse to be together. So, you know, you could go as far as saying that, you know, music is a human right and we all have the right to be able to experience that in our cities.
The importance of music to a culture, I think, is fundamental and it's vital. I mean, it's part of our cultural DNA. I mean, everybody has a story about, you know, their engagement with live music, whether it's a festival that they attended or a gig at their local pub. They range in size and scope, and there's a festival that can appeal to everybody across, you know, cultures, demographics, whether you're 18, you're 85, wherever you're from. They provide that forum, that opportunity for people to get together and celebrate and share, you know, their favourite musicians and artists.
What we see right here at this very moment transcends genre, it transcends age, it transcends gender, it transcends religion, where we come from, where we live, or what we do for a living. Every single one of us here today share the beautiful and unbreakable bond that is our love for music. We stand here together because every single one of us needs to protect our right to go out and enjoy the music that we love being performed live. Festivals, by definition, are cheerful and joyful celebrations. They're integral to the social fabric in our society today. They offer a chance for many like-minded people to come together in one place and celebrate their shared love of music. New friendships and new relationships are born at festivals. Festivals build community. So I ask Gladys and the New South Wales government to please consider you're not just killing live music, you're also taking away our need as human beings to connect with each other and together to celebrate the beauty and power of sweet, wonderful music.
Well, music and culture are so important to our identity and who we are. It's a way to express ourselves, and also it's a vehicle for us to be able to socialise around it. You know, it's an opportunity for work, and so many important relationships and friendships that I've got in my life happen because of nightlife, because of festivals, because of music, and we can't sacrifice that. And I think the government needs to be held to account if they are going to sacrifice all of those things. And if we don't speak up, well, then we get the government that we deserve.
So music is incredibly important for people's well-being. So music and socialising, they help relieve stress, they improve people's moods. So at their best, music festivals can be sort of transformative. So there's some studies on the music festival Burning Man in the United States, which show that after attending, people have real improvements in their sort of neurochemistry and the way that they think and the way that they perceive things, which is, you know, really amazing.
Without music, what's the point really?
Don't let any government underestimate the power of the music community.
In this sequel, we wanted to explore and expose
the same dark forces that have now decided to target live music and music festivals with the very same MO.
Don't you believe it? It's too late to change this now.
Time Out, the global media company that has been around since 1968, recently released their 2019 48 Best Cities of the World. The survey covered everything from food, entertainment, culture, to safety, sociability and affordability. The results for Sydney were dire, but no surprise.
To better times.
New York City, the city that never sleeps, came out on top. Melbourne was number 2. Melbourne is a thriving 24-hour city with a supported and celebrated music, hospitality and nightlife scene. Melbourne also boasts the second lowest assault rate in the country, narrowly beaten only by Tasmania. And Sydney, that city that everyone once dreamed of living in or visiting, ranked just above Abu Dhabi at 39th place out of a possible 48, the 10th worst city in the world.
It's becoming increasingly embarrassing, and I hate apologising from being from Sydney. The Time Out report that came out just a couple of weeks ago that said that we were like, what, the most boring or dullest, or, you know, these rankings come out all the time. Some of them are better than the others. The one that I find most concerning though is the one that came out from the Committee for Sydney late last year called Sustaining the Advantage. It's a global benchmark of how different cities in the world compete against each other. So Sydney for a very long time has been a contender city. We're not Paris, we're not London, we're not New York. There are 7 cities in the world that are just the best cities, basically because they have great culture, they're affordable to live in, they have excellent public transport. There's a whole series of rankings. One of the things that this report identified is that Sydney is really letting itself down when it comes to transport. We have some of the worst public transport in the world. The fact that we don't have 24-hour transport at the moment, sure it's coming, but we don't have it at the moment is really, really setting us backward. But the other thing that's really concerning is that after coal and iron ore, international education is actually Australia's 3rd biggest export. So if you think about the fact that for every international student that we attract to come and study and live in Sydney for the duration of their degree, we're creating 20 jobs. That's such a significant influence in our culture. So with that comes a whole lot of responsibility to ensure that when people come here to live and study, that they have a good time, that they feel safe at night time, that they don't feel like they're doing something wrong, that they don't show up to a festival where there's more cops than punters. Not only is it really embarrassing, but it's really economically irresponsible because these are our brand ambassadors. They then go back into the world, and if they're asked by their friends and family, hey, how is studying Sydney? And they're like, well, you know what? It was really boring. I had a really crappy time. They're not going to come back and want to set up businesses here. Their friends are not going to want to come and visit. And that has so many knock-on effects to the rest of our economy. And it's just a real shame.
It's oh so quiet. Shh, shh. It's oh so still.
ever want to see this event held in Sydney or New South Wales ever again. We will do everything we can to shut this down.
Everybody got a dollar and a dream. You got a couple more, now you coming for our scene. You know kids are always gonna wanna pop a bean, but they deserve to know if what they're taking isn't clean. Think it's time you step down, nothing but a letdown. Stopping all the fun, you know the beat just trying to get down. Acting high and mighty while you're sipping on your champagne. Yeah, I had a couple thoughts about your campaign. Shut it down, yeah. Shut it down, yeah. Fuck the casino, wanna go to Mountain Sound, yeah.
Newly re-elected Premier Gladys Berejiklian would have you believe that music festivals are the villains of this story. But are they the villains? Or perhaps they're just convenient scapegoats to misdirect blame on poor government policy?
Well, I think any time there's a story that involves young people are just seen as low-hanging fruit. It's as simple as that.
I mean, music festivals have been a very easy target for government and very easy to identify 14 festivals, which New South Wales has done, and say that they're high risk, and then you look at those festivals and they don't actually meet the government's own criteria, then there are serious questions around what the true motivation is, and I think that's pretty self-evident. I mean, if you're really serious about addressing safety at music festivals, or you're serious about addressing drug use, then you would have to be looking at a much broader drug and alcohol education campaign and harm minimisation programs and the sorts of things that are really going to deliver those sorts of objectives. I mean, additional police presence or sniffer dogs and those kinds of tools aren't going to deliver that outcome.
When people don't understand culture across all areas of life, it's really easy to point the finger, but it's also really dangerous because while you are seeing only the negative, you're not seeing the opportunity. And I think we're really missing out on a lot. The fact that now there's 6 years worth of people, that's almost a whole generation of kids that haven't experienced the night in Sydney.
I mean, I've spent a lot of time at music festivals, so previously as someone who used to enjoy going to them, and more recently, I guess, professionally, since I started Rave Reviews, I've been going to festivals. We cover a lot of festivals in Sydney, sort of doing interviews with people and getting video content, that kind of thing. And to me, they've always been a place of positivity and joy. I guess it's common knowledge that people do take drugs at festivals, but then people do take drugs at lots of events. There've sadly been some deaths at festivals recently, which have triggered a lot of these changes to festival licensing. But we know that pill testing works, it's been proven, and I guess if the aim of the game is to try and prevent deaths at festivals, then why not implement something which is scientifically proven, which is backed by the Royal Australian College of Physicians, rather than these sort of blanket reactionary policies which sort of punish everyone and destroy industries.
This has been a knee-jerk reaction by a government wishing to be seen to be doing something about safety at festivals and rushing legislation through in time for an election. It seems pretty transparent to me that they just wanted to get this through as quickly as they could and then say, look at us, aren't we great, we've done something about festivals. I don't think killing festivals is the answer, but that seems to be their response.
Sure, Sydney still has its beaches, Deepwater Harbour, long summers. So what has changed since the 2000 Sydney Olympics, when the City of Sydney was the international dream city by every possible measure? Quite a lot, actually, and it has to do with these faces and their cronies.
The allegations surrounding Craig Thompson is that he's also ready to take his photo off the changes and raise seats of power, and we are getting about rebuilding New South Wales. Everyone. Rest assured that we're extremely mindful of the proposition that people don't want to change the local character of their communities.
The latest outrage, courtesy of the New South Wales nanny state, is Gladys's war on music. But this needs to be viewed in the company of successive other outrages against good governance and attacks on civil liberties. We asked Jess Miller, ex-deputy mayor and a councillor from the City of Sydney, to recap some of Gladys's and her cronies' greatest hits on Sydney.
Everything from greatest hits include building a private roadway creating a corporate, using taxpayers' money, mind you, creating a private company so that you can't actually see or understand what's going on with the public money. That was a good one. The light rail, that's been a cracker, hasn't it? In an effort to rush through this project, they stuffed up the contracts so badly against the advice of their own people. So there you go, that's delayed. A whole bunch of businesses have gone up in smoke because of that. You know, the sell-off of beautiful public housing, Sirius and Millers Point, purpose-built public housing, sold off for private gain. The move of the powerhouse, again, it's unreal. Lockouts, stadiums, oh my God, there's so many. The failure to adequately monitor air pollution, like this is kind of governance 101 stuff we're talking about. And the failure's not only been systemic and cultural, but it's been a real failure of principle. So I don't know that there's a lot to be optimistic about. Oh, my favourite hit of this government has been the state significant infrastructure wand, where basically there's this power that state governments have in planning that helps them identify areas like hospital precincts or, you know, important public transport hubs where they go, you know what, this is a big development, it's a state development, we'll take care of that. That's the intention of this power. However, they've basically kind of run absolute roughshod with it in the city and kind of taken almost 26 hectares of city land, including the Waterloo estate, and said state significant. That means the public has no say. That means that the city isn't the consent authority. It basically is just a magic wand that says, we'll take it, we'll take it, we'll take it, we'll take it, we'll take it. And really, it's just a big fuck you to the whole community.
Add these together, and it starts to become clear how and why the quality of life in Sydney's ever-increasing nanny state has taken a nosedive.
One striking aspect of the New South Wales State Government is their MO, the combination of ignorance and arrogance. And it is a lethal combination when you're in charge of laws governing public safety and personal liberties.
Why are you starting with reduced services?
Sorry?
Why are you starting with reduced services?
Just quickly on that score, and I'm glad you've asked, we're going to have 5 trams in play and we phase it up over the next couple of weeks. So there's no drama here.
We've delivered it. We've said we'll do an extension, it'll happen. Just look at our record. Actions speak louder than words.
You committed 4 years ago to release a business case for the extension, so we still haven't seen it.
Sorry, which media outlet are you from?
Yeah, that's normal for them.
I'd say this.
That's just Operation Normal, yeah.
I just hope you have a little bit of a positive outlook on today, because it's a wonderful outcome for the city. And, you know, it's great news for everyone.
You talk about a positive outcome, but as we rode the tram today, the streets were virtually empty, and you keep talking about revitalisation. That's not the message we're getting from business people.
Well, let me tell you this.
Have you spoken to the Hunter Business Chamber?
Okay, I've walked up and down the street and spoken to just about every sort of...
Well, I think by having the state government crack down on music festivals in such a way that would really take the shine of what is a billion-dollar industry that thousands and thousands of people rely on for work, just shows the government that's really out of touch. I think a lot of people have tried to come up with excuses for the government. You know, why would you do that so close to a state election? But they have, but I guess it just goes to show exactly how out of touch the Premier Gladys Berejiklian is, and also her government.
I understand being in a position, being in government, of course you have to balance priorities all the time, and you're constantly playing such a kind of a game of balance and trying to take everybody's needs into consideration. But to actively not listen and kind of do the opposite it's next level. I really don't understand it. Maybe people making these decisions just haven't been out for a while. Maybe we just need to go and invite them out. Maybe they're so disconnected from the reality of the night or the festival or culture or bands or fashion or music or anything to do with joy, that they've become these really sad, angry people that just make stupid decisions.
The government's approach has been rushed and ad hoc. Their approach has not considered the economic impacts. Their approach shows yet again that they do not value the cultural importance of music festivals. But worst of all, the only way their approach is making festivals safer is by ensuring that many festivals will not happen in New South Wales.
It's a cookie-cutter approach that's applied right across the board.
I hate to say it, but just like James Lingo said, this is Lockouts 2.0. Rather than taking an evidence-based approach to a real social challenge, what this government does is introduce regulation that just shuts it down. Gladys, we need you to look at the devastating impact your knee-jerk regulation has had, like the lockout laws. We can't take it again. Sydney, our industry, our music culture, our city, our culture just can't take another hatchet job like that one. Don't kill live music.
First it was nightlife, this time it's music festivals. The same identical manoeuvres coming right out of the playbook, be it Gladys Berejiklian, Mike Baird or Barry O'Farrell.
The New South Wales Liberals, their corrupt cronies, their low-life friends in high places, apparatchiks and the New South Wales Police Force, all hide behind an entirely confected image of faith and values, all designed to smear faux Christian piety all over their relentless pursuit of self-interest. There is no serve and protect in New South Wales. When, as has happened, when they get away with one thing, they simply move on to the next, and the next, and the next. And if not checked, this carnage will surely continue. Not only did the lockouts decimate the nightlife sector in the Cross and Darlinghurst, but it virtually destroyed every business operating in the day or night in the entertainment precincts, and in the process wiped out hundreds of millions of dollars of business and property values, the CBD included. A recent Deloitte study showed Sydney is missing out on $16 billion a year because our nighttime economy is underdeveloped. Foot traffic to the CBD at night has fallen by over 80%, and that's something that's affected retailers and restaurants as well as clubs. And as for curbing the problems of violence, the problems just move to other places.
Yeah, I think the impact of the lockout laws in New South Wales, I mean the impact on the nighttime economy, I think the flow-on effects of that speak for themselves. I mean they haven't been positive outcomes, you know, for the state, and there have been a number of things that have been in play, I think, in New South Wales that have all, when you add them all up, all combined to, rather than facilitate a dynamic, interesting, you know, entertainment environment, nighttime economy, they've actually had the opposite effect, where they've actually undermined that and taken that away from the state.
At the City of Sydney, we've seen it all before. We saw what happens when they take a sledgehammer to a place like King's Cross. And we are going to see the same impact across New South Wales, and we will not have it.
And when you consider that New South Wales is the largest state in the country, we'd be expecting to see, you know, much larger growth and more activity up here. But what we're seeing is the inverse of that, where we're seeing, you know, companies and festivals shutting down, talking about needing to move interstate. And New South Wales having a reputation, not just nationally but now internationally, as being not a good place to do business. And I think that's something that needs to change.
Well, I think what we saw was a bit of complacency really around the lockouts issue. I mean, only a small sector of people really kept up the fight over the years, but I think this war on festivals has completely re-energised the fight, essentially. And not just that, but music festivals happen all over New South Wales. So it wasn't just people within inner city Sydney that were pissed off, it was actually people all over the state and the people who relied on these festivals and these small regional towns for work.
So only a few years ago, I was up on a stage talking about the lockout laws and what damage they were going to do to us, our city and our nightlife. And look what happened. It all came true. And you know today they're going to do the same thing to the whole state of New South Wales that they've done to Sydney. That is this government. Don't kill live music, Gladys. Don't kill live music. There's only one message we really did send her, and that is at the ballot box. Let's get rid of the bums. Let's get rid of the bums. We don't need them.
A year-long parliamentary inquiry into the state of Sydney's music and nightlife economy also found that the industry was in peril due to the New South Wales Government's history of neglect and lack of funding. It recommended that the government match funding for contemporary music with that of the Victorian Government, or $35 million over the next 4 years. Since the introduction of the lockout laws, there has been a tokenistic relaxing of restrictions. More than 20 venues have been granted half an hour live entertainment extensions, and Oxford Street and surrounding area has gone lockout free for Mardi Gras night for the past 2 years. But not everybody was a loser. The New South Wales government's mates in property development and the casino business were handed a gold mine. On August the 10th, 2019, Sydney billionaire developer, nightclub and bar owner Justin Hems made a submission to the parliamentary inquiry into the city's nighttime economy.
As many of you would know, I supported the government when it introduced the legislation, and the lockout laws provided a useful circuit breaker to a culture of violence that had developed. However, I think there is now a strong consensus that the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction. Sydney has undergone a significant decline in its vibrancy and attraction to both locals and visitors alike. Our cultural fabric has also progressed a long way since then, and we are a more sophisticated and engaged city. This is about Sydney and my desire and passion for it to be the best city it can possibly be. And my father always said that this country is the land of opportunity. However, the current nighttime economy is seriously limiting those opportunities, and we need to unlock Sydney's full potential and establish and promote a 24-hour, vibrant and safe city. Thank you.
On Sunday, the 8th of September 2019, Sydney Premier Gladys Berejiklian finally conceded that it was time to boost the city's struggling nighttime economy. And after a cross-party parliamentary committee review of the laws earlier in the year, Ms Berejiklian unveiled plans to drop the 1:30 a.m. lockout legislation, but only in the CBD and not in King's Cross, where businesses have been hit the hardest. The same CBD where billionaire developer Justin Hems just happens to have built up a portfolio of 46 venues, many acquired for a pittance because of the lockouts. So now you can add the Merivale Group to the Star and Crown casinos who get the VIP government treatment.
Did they figure out that stupid shit in New South Wales yet, trying to pass that law so it's impossible to put on a concert? Make it hard for people to go see live music. That's the stupidest fucking thing I ever heard in my life. What could make a community stronger and better than everyone going out to see live music? Jesus Christ.
Who the fuck came up with that idea?
Some fucking outlandish shit they're trying to do in New South Wales. Trying to stop rock gigs.
Some bullshit.
Trying to stop live gigs. Live music forever for the people.
The contemporary music and festival industry contributes $325 million to the New South Wales economy, with 6 million people attending each and every year.
And after weeks of controversy, cancellations and one class action lawsuit, the promoters behind Laneway, Splendour and Falls have joined forces with industry bodies like Music New South Wales, ARIA and APRA to encourage music fans to protest these new attacks on festivals. If you live in Sydney, you probably already know why. Since the state Liberal government was elected in 2011, it has handed down a series of laws and regulations that have gutted the music industry, using clubs and festivals as a convenient scapegoat for issues they'd rather not have to actually deal with. Lately, things have gotten so bad that the industry is in a fight for survival, and live music faces a very new threat.
Well, the New South Wales government introduced a music festival licensing scheme at the end of last year, and despite the industry's calls to sit down with us and talk about the objectives and what they're trying to achieve, they weren't interested in doing that. So you saw a very clear example of what we would consider very blatant politicking off the back of some very sad and tragic deaths at music festivals, and I think all of us share the objective of providing safe environments and experiences for people, but there are various ways in that could be achieved, but the industry really wasn't given the opportunity to sit down with government and work through what might have been more appropriate responses to the sorts of issues that they were trying to address.
As a representative of local government, this festival's licence scheme undermines the role of local government. Right now, local governments are the ones that provide development approval for festivals. We're the ones that work with the festival organisers, with police, with health, to make sure that events are managed locally and that they're safe. Now, it's all going to be managed by the Office of Liquor and Gaming, even all ages events, even alcohol-free events. This is the New South Wales government taking power away from local communities, which is what they do best, and taking it over to bureaucrats on Macquarie Street.
Festivals care deeply about safety. What the government is trying to do is not about safety. It's about trying to control an industry through the Liquor Act. I've met with Liquor and Gaming, New South Wales Health, New South Wales Police and the Premier's Department and told them that this has been too rushed and it's going to have far-reaching impacts, and they have not listened.
There's got to be a regulatory impact statement on how this regulation is going to affect local communities, how it's going to affect the industry, and how it's going to affect the thousands of people who work in our festival sector. The New South Wales government can wait. The New South Wales government needs to legitimately work with the festival sector and with local communities to come up with a piece of regulation that works to protect public safety, but also protect jobs, protect community, and protect live music in New South Wales.
I think if you're looking at safety at festivals or in any entertainment context, you have to put them into a broader social context. And I think what we've seen here is a very heavy-handed regulatory response under the guise of trying to make environments safer, particularly with environments where there might be drug taking, and rather than putting that into recognising that as a broader social issue and social challenge and looking at it in those terms. So what we would have expected to see, I think, would have been a more sensible, evidence-based conversation around what is happening within our music festivals. Are there risk factors? How might we address those? But they need to be seen in the context of drug taking in the broader community.
So yeah, I mean, all the recent changes to music festival licensing, they've obviously had a big impact on the industry. If you think about how much work goes into planning a festival of the size that some of these festivals that have been affected, and then 2 festivals in particular had to cancel a week before they were due to take place. You can imagine the impact that would have on the people that had spent a year or more organising the event, And people that work in the music industry are already a high-risk group for mental health problems. So entertainment workers have double the rate of suicide attempts, 5 times the rate of depression, and up to 10 times the rate of moderate to severe anxiety. And then if you're compounding that with all these stresses of job losses and unemployment that are bound to come with festival cancellations, then it's sort of a dangerous game. You're putting people already vulnerable at greater risk.
Peter Noble, the highly successful promoter behind the world-famous blues festival in Byron Bay, made a statement as follows. I'm saying now Bluesfest will leave New South Wales. We have no choice. It's a matter of survival. Will the last festival to leave New South Wales please turn out the light of culture in this soon-to-be barren state? The current policies handed down by the New South Wales government in an attempt to curb festival deaths will decimate our industry. Even though we are Australia's most highly awarded music festival, both nationally and internationally, having won Best Major Event at the New South Wales Tourism Awards 3 years in a row, and in representing New South Wales we came in second in the Australian Tourism Awards, beating Victoria's Formula 1 Grand Prix, we've been designated a high-risk event. This will cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to comply with a policy where we and every other event in the state have had zero opportunity to have any consultation or input into a policy where we will need to spend significantly more money to put this event on each year with zero notice. The policy will see our full-strength liquor licence approval denied, while a myriad of other costs may be levied, costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars. The New South Wales Police regularly state that our policies are those of an industry leader in the supply of alcohol, field hospital and crowd security and care. But due to headlines in the media, our 30-year-old professional business is to be seriously damaged in a new policy imposed regarding festival presentation by a government who has rushed the judgment of our industry without full consultation of stakeholders or meetings with entertainment professionals. We, like most events in the state, supply a significant level of culture. We don't receive a cent from the government, even though we cause thousands of people to be employed and bring in tens of millions of dollars into New South Wales through tourism. I have in my 50 years in presenting music never experienced such poorly thought out, unbalanced legislation. Surely a professional governing body could do better. It's the Lockout Laws version 2 for festivals.
It doesn't help that music in New South Wales is already widely underfunded. A parliamentary inquiry ascertained that if music in New South Wales was to get the same government funding as Victoria on a capita basis, it would need to get 8 times the amount.
So the numbers are bad, but the cultural damage done to Sydney over the past few years is harder to quantify. How do new artists kickstart their careers if there's nowhere for them to play? What music hasn't been made because there wasn't the scene to foster it in? And don't forget how the laws came down, rushed through Parliament without any real consultation with the music industry, and put into effect just 3 weeks later. Just like the knee-jerk reaction to the 2 one-punch attacks in King's Cross, with the lockout laws that didn't address any of the root problems, all of which were street-based rather than venue-based. Problems that had been successfully addressed by cities like Amsterdam. Nor did it address the problem of male violence, toxic masculinity, or Australia's relationship with alcohol. But instead made venues, live music, and the entertainment business the scapegoat for a complex issue.
Well, I'm not sure of previous histories with respect to, what the Premier's view might have been on a range of issues, but I think what we've seen here is that if, it is pure politicking off the back of some, very tragic deaths, and an implication that, all music festivals are places where there's a lot of, drug taking and drug dealing going on, and that's simply not true. And I think what's very much missing from this discussion and even any review of these regulations is the evidence base.
It's strange, she seems like quite a reasonable person on many fronts. And that's why understanding the motivation behind these decisions is so difficult. You can't actually see the logic in it. You would think that if you're a rational person trying to find a good outcome, you would make a decision based on evidence. And it stands to reason that if you want to stop people dying, not just in the short term, but the medium and the long term, you hold a summit and you figure it out together and you have a long-term strategy in place. You just can't, like, everyone knows the war on drugs has been lost years ago. If you look at places like in the Netherlands, they've had safe pill testing and drug testing for 20 years, and it works.
Whilst the ill-conceived lockout laws have decimated the once thriving Sydney nightlife precincts, the one place the party is still pumping are the casinos.
I think that if this government were really, really concerned about violence, about health, about addiction, about social isolation and dislocation, they'd be doing something about the casinos. Because if you look at the real incidences that have largely been covered up and kind of swept under the rug, that's where the violence is happening. That's where you've got the biggest users of pokie machines at the moment in Sydney is kids aged 19 to 25. That's horrible. Like, these are kids that should be out socialising, that should be out, engaging with each other and seeing music, not putting money into a slot machine.
When the New South Wales government announced the boundaries of the entertainment precincts that would be subject to lockout laws, it left both the Star Casino and the soon-to-be-built Crown Casino at Barangaroo off the map, despite the fact that the Star was the most violent venue in New South Wales at the time. So that the special treatment for casinos wasn't a coincidence, and no wonder Mike Baird became known as Casino Mike. This anomaly may make more sense when you learn that Rod Bruce, a very senior public servant and the Deputy Premier Stone as Chief of Staff, joined the casino as an employee. Without consultation, lockout laws started being introduced, excluding Star and Crown's Barangaroo Casino in 2012. In 2015, Chris Downing, President of the New South Wales Liberals, also joined the Star Casino. Months later, the permanently placed licensing officer at the Star was removed and minimum problem gamble withdrawal limits raised. Michael Photius, the Liberal power broker lobbyist who gave Gladys the premiership, is paid a minimum $20,000 a year lobbying fee by the Star. The Star now proposes building a giant Ritz-Carlton Tower adjunct which could be in breach of planning laws. The state and national Liberal parties have an uncomfortably close relationship with the casinos, something that's been well documented over the years. And James Packer, who owns Crown Casinos, donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to the federal Liberal Party, as well as Labor and the Nationals. Later that year, Crown's development applications for the Barangaroo Casino was rushed through its approval process by former State Liberal Premier Barry O'Farrell and then Treasurer Mike Baird. And while other venues have floundered, the Star has thrived under the lockout laws. In the first 5 months after the laws were introduced, as late-night crowds were left with nowhere else to party, they enjoyed a $100 million jump in revenue. Then, in 2015, the former president of the New South Wales Liberal Party, Chris Downing, resigned after scoring a top job at, you guessed it, the Star, another move that appears straight out of the government playbook. The Star is also exempt from the violent venue scheme, with its 3 strikes, under which other bars, pubs and clubs face the loss of their liquor licence for repeated breach of licensing laws. Which is lucky for them because assaults at the casino significantly increased after the lockout laws were implemented. Nothing exposes the fallacy the lockout laws were built on more clearly than the exemptions granted to casinos. If the laws were a measure designed to reduce violence, why was the most violent venue in the state made exempt? And if you're just trying to make the city safer, why go to the lengths to ensure a social evil like gambling, which kills 1 Australian every day, can prosper? Years on, these are the questions the state government still hasn't been able to give us answers to.
You know I smoked a lot of grass. Oh Lord, I popped a lot of pills. But I've never touched nothing.
So we are now to believe that the state's epidemic of drug abuse and related deaths is now the sole cause of the music festival industry.
Gladys and her cronies would like you to believe that music and festivals are at the epicenter and are the most lethal arena of the country's battle with drugs. In fact, this is really just a convenient case of misdirection to distract the public from knowing the truth about the state government's abominable failure on drug policy. Here's a terrible statistic. Almost 2,000 people die from drug-related deaths every year in Australia. And if MDMA and ecstasy deaths were separated from ice and amphetamine deaths, their ranking would even be much, much lower. In 2016, the most recent year the Australian Bureau of Statistics has released figures for an overdose victim was most likely to be a middle-aged male living outside of a capital city who misused prescription drugs. But if you've been following Gladys's press conferences, the deaths you're most likely to have heard about are the couple that take place at festivals every summer, where the dead are overwhelmingly young, white, middle class and urban based. Theirs are the sort of faces it's easy for the government to latch onto and to use as an opportunity to appear to be being tough on drugs.
When we're talking about all of the hysteria around music festivals, we're talking about less than 1% of deaths that occur that are drug related, that happen at music festivals. Instead, overwhelmingly, the majority of drug related deaths occur in middle-aged men, and they are because of the abuse of prescription drugs such as benzos and oxycodone. And why isn't the government doing something about that? It's because it's just not an attention-grabbing headline. So we are seeing young people and also music culture being targeted, and it was exactly the same deal with the lockout laws.
Where are all the drugs? Where are they? Are they at the music festival? Are they at the old folks' home? Or I don't know. I mean, I think that's why at the City of Sydney we've been advocating really strongly for a drug summit. I'm not an expert. I wish I was. But I haven't been an expert on drugs in the festival scene for a few years now, maybe 10, maybe. But I think what we do need to do is have this drug summit and get people who use drugs recreationally, people who use drugs and are forming dependencies post-hospital, to have that conversation. Invite emergency service workers, invite GPs, invite a whole range of people to actually get the lay of the land and make a decision based on evidence, like we did with the safe injecting houses in the Cross, and like we've done with a whole lot of other measures. It's not good enough to just say no.
The truth is, Australia's tough on drugs policy is failing spectacularly. In 2016, the amount of drug deaths in Australia was at its highest it's been in 20 years, at pace with the number of fatalities during the peak of the heroin crisis. The majority of those deaths took place outside of metropolitan areas. Unemployment, mental health conditions, and chronic health issues statistically make people more likely to abuse drugs. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders were almost 4 times more likely to suffer a drug-related death than other Australians. These national statistics are obviously not the fault of the New South Wales government alone, but they do illustrate that festivals are not where the government needs to be fighting its drug battle. Capital cities are not where they need to fight it. The majority of drug-related deaths in Australia have nothing to do with live music and have everything to do with social disadvantage. And Gladys's outdated, woefully ill-conceived methods are causing more drug issues than they are solving. And many of the deaths and overdoses that actually do take place at music events could be prevented easily with pill testing, something that the government still refuses to implement.
Well, the Premier Gladys Berejiklian and also her government do have a really out of touch and out of step drug policy, and that's out of step with the community, and it's also out of step with what experts and health experts in the area have to say. And it's very simple. If you don't know what you're talking about, listen to the evidence, and that should be a government's approach to every single policy area. It doesn't matter whether it's about housing or whether it's about drug policy. So in this case, and when it comes to this call from the community that has 60% support to introduce pill testing, The government doesn't want to listen to it, yet it has the backing of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians, the Australian Medical Association, the College of General Practitioners as well. So, you know, the fact that she's just blatantly ignoring their advice just goes to show that we have a government that doesn't listen when that should be government's first agenda, is to listen.
Being a psychiatrist, you know, I think policies around drug use should be based on evidence. So pill testing is proven, you know, as well as weeding out contaminants in pills, which are often, you know, the lethal ingredient, which sadly end up killing people. It also provides the opportunity for education. So when people take their pills to a testing station, there are professionals there who can advise them, and it's a really good opportunity to make contact, because, you know, otherwise young people don't get any education around drug use because of this, I guess, hardline stance where you kind of say, no, we're not even going to talk about it.
I think the government needs to take a breath and take a step back and look at the issue in a much broader context, and whether that includes having a drug forum where they bring the experts together and they have a sensible, rational discussion about this, where everything should be on the table. And I think it's really important for governments, no matter where they are, to be engaging with the industry sectors, you know, that they're trying to implement change, you know, within. But they also should base their policies on an evidence base, and there has been the evidence base, particularly with this current set of music festival regulations, has been in a complete vacuum. So there's been no consideration looking at music festivals in the broader context of our more general society, looking at drug and alcohol problems in that broader kind of context, and then looking at what kinds of targeted strategies might be appropriate, you know, in that instance. And they won't be, it won't be a one-size-fits-all response. And you know, pill testing is, you know, potentially part of that mix, and it should be considered as, you know, part of that mix.
Just test the bloody pills. Just test them.
We know that pill testing saves lives. The logic behind it is astoundingly simple. But instead of that low-cost solution, we get increased police presence, more sniffer dogs at events. Something that arguably makes MDMA/ecstasy even more dangerous, as young people heading to festivals, when faced with the over-the-top police presence, may consume their drugs in one hit rather than taking them on a gradual basis, or may resort to buying them from an unknown stranger when inside rather than from a trusted known source. But Gladys, I've never taken drugs, and her cronies would not know this.
The Sniffer Dog program essentially started around the Sydney Olympics in 2000 and was originally brought on to try and identify explosives because, you know, as the Olympic Games are an international event, does sometimes get the attention and some activity around terrorism. So after the Olympics were done and dusted, the police had a conversation around should we decommission this program, but the decision was no, because there's generally a policy of police wanting to get more and more resources and to expand their budget, and so they don't want to decommission programs. And so what they did was that they repurposed the dog program to also sniff out drugs and essentially sniff out and criminalise, you know, more people out there in society.
I think we can say that heavy-handed regulatory responses, you know, additional police, additional sniffer dogs, and those kinds of, you know, mechanisms and strategies, you know, won't deliver, you know, safer music festivals, and they won't deliver, you know, safer environments for, you know, for festival goers to be in. I mean, they may well have the opposite effect where you know, people may panic in those situations, or people will have really negative experiences. I mean, we already know during the election campaign in New South Wales that there were stories, you know, and young people who were being strip searched and being, you know, accosted by, you know, dogs or police or whatever, having very, very negative experiences, and, you know, many of them not carrying drugs, not involved in drugs in any kind of way, and yet that was somehow an acceptable experience for young people, young women to have. they're not appropriate experiences, and I don't think that's something that we would want to see become the norm. I mean, certainly as a parent myself, you know, with a 25-year-old daughter, I mean, that's not the experience I want her to have when she's, you know, going to see her favourite bands and groups at a music festival.
The problem is that when kids walk into these scenarios now where they're, you know, greeted with a line of cops and dogs, is that they're just chugging down the pills because, you know, they panic. And that's where the bad stuff happens. Like, you can deal with the bad effects of a quarter of a pill or a half a pill, but if you've taken 2, that's scary. Like, so I can't even imagine how terrified these kids would be.
You know, I go to a lot of music festivals since I started Rave Reviews, and previously I used to attend them myself just for enjoyment. And you know, I can certainly say that what's been happening recently at music festivals with this, you know, extreme police presence, lots of sniffer dogs, people certainly feel very intimidated. That's the first thing. And the other thing is, I know that some people who do decide to take drugs into festivals, they sometimes, if they think they're going to be searched, they swallow them all, which, you know, obviously is extremely dangerous. So again, I'm not sure if having more and more police presence at these festivals is the answer. Again, I think we need to sort of decide what our aim is with all this. If the aim is to reduce harm and save lives, then I'm not sure we're going about it in the right way.
It seems the Liberal government does not care about the people who struggle with addiction and die in the shadows of regional Australia every year. And it doesn't care about the teenagers who die at festivals either. Because instead of doing anything to actually make festivals safer, they've used them as a diversionary tactic from a bigger, harder, more complicated issue. They've rejected reason every step of the way and stormed ahead with a drug approach that is little more than political point scoring. The New South Wales government's approach to drugs is not just ineffective or lazy or misguided, though it is all those things too. It is immoral and it is letting people die. Just like lockouts were implemented in a knee-jerk response to alcohol-fueled violence, the new wave of festival regulations have come down as a band-aid solution to overdose deaths at festivals. Without consultation, last month, Gladys Berejiklian put in place measures that make it too expensive to festivals to operate in New South Wales at all. She decreed that events classed as high risk won't be granted a permit to operate unless they cough up for the cost of policing and emergency services attending, costs that are 10 times what they are in other states of Australia. A service price so high that Mountain Sounds and Safari have already cancelled their 2019 events after being hit with police bills they couldn't afford. Moreover, the government's classification of what constitutes a high-risk event doesn't even seem like they understand it. Even Laneway, the festival you can take your mum and dad to, is on their high maximum risk list. Once again, this is what happens when ignorance and arrogance combine. It might seem like it's coming out of nowhere, but actually, the New South Wales government have been moving towards this policy for years. In 2016, then Premier Mike Baird threatened to ban festivals after a woman overdosed at Field Day. He said he wanted to review how festivals were granted event permits and make it harder for them to go ahead. The plan to clamp down on festivals has been underway for years. 2019 was just the year the Liberal government were able to make their dream a reality.
On the 27th of September 2019, we received some optimistic, hopeful news. The recently convened parliamentary inquiry on the new festival regulation legislation recommended that the legislation was unlawful and should be scrapped and overturned in Parliament. The key findings and recommendations of the report were as follows. The consultation process by the New South Wales Government was inadequate for the implementation of the Liquor Amendment Music Festivals Regulation 2019 and the Gaming Liquor Administration Amendment Music Festivals Regulation 2019, and the two acts should be disallowed by the Legislative Council. The New South Wales Health Guidelines for Music Festival event organisers, music festival harm reduction, should be continued to be developed to help address issues of drug and alcohol related issues at festivals. The New South Wales Government should immediately establish a regulatory roundtable with key stakeholders from Liquor and Gaming New South Wales, police, industry representatives, local government and health related harm minimisation groups. I didn't make this film for fame or personal gain. I did it out of passion and personal frustration with the ongoing attacks on my personal liberties in the city where I live. My hope for this film is that a vast amount of people watch it. People in government, people in law enforcement. And I hope it gives them a newfound appreciation for the live music industry and festivals. And more importantly, shines a light on the improper dealings and poor governance and ongoing implementation of ill-conceived legislation by this government without consulting or really figuring out what the problem is. This nanny state lunacy in New South Wales has to stop. Fight the power. I also hope it helps people gain a better understanding of many of the issues that seem to be misunderstood. Issues that are continually misrepresented by the government, law enforcement, and even the corporate media. As I stated in the first Lockouts film, these days you can't trust what the government tells you, and you can't trust the corporate media to tell you the truth, and you never really know who's in whose back pocket. And just because a government makes a law, it doesn't mean it's necessarily right, and it doesn't mean you have to cop it. I'm hoping that this film encourages more people to speak out, act up, join protest groups, join rallies, write to the local member. Anything that's going to help create a wave of pressure back against this corrupt government and their crazy, ill-conceived, poorly thought through legislation. And I'm hoping these festival regulation, crazy laws will be scrapped and the New South Wales government sent an embarrassing message that they can no longer go about rushing through legislation without the proper consultation and consideration of the real issues and the facts. In New South Wales, we still have a long way to go to get rid of this nanny state, but hopefully this film and this issue and this legislation will be canned to the dustbin of history.
In New South Wales, we still have a long way to go to reverse this nanny state and the bad policy that needs to be addressed and reversed. There needs to be ongoing effort and vigilance by people like you and I. And if you do choose to take a stand, who knows? You might just change the world.
We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now, is where we draw the line. The world is waking up. And change is coming, whether you like it or not. Right here, right now, 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 right here, right now. Waking up, and change is coming whether you like it or not. Thank you.
we abuse it, never gonna lose it. Everything will work out right. I say, we can dance if we want to, or we can leave your friends behind. Cause your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well, the